Back to the Heroes Forge. Today, we're going to look at race relations in the United States, generally speaking, in culture. For those of you who have been living under a rock, there was a major court case that was finalized this week about Karmelo Anthony, and he had been convicted of murder of a white gentleman. And we're going to go ahead and take a look at the facts about the case. We're going to take a look at some situations around the case, like what the reactions are to the findings. What are the reactions on both sides of the aisle? What are the implications in terms of race in the United States? What are the implications in terms of how we interact with our fellow man? All of these questions are things that I intend to get through in this stream today. So I'm going to go ahead and bring up some stuff from X. If you do not follow me on X, go ahead and hit me up at the Heroes Forge on X, and you might see some spicy content.
We just fuck them up, y'all, until they go back to the mountains. Yeah, last Saturday we just fucked them up. Oh, this cuz we wake up, we yawn, we brush our teeth, we wash our face, and we go outside and we just fuck them up. First, that's how we gotta start getting our day started. Can we please pick a day where we just fuck them while you up? Just beat their ass. Especially the old ones. Just beat their ass, the kids. Just beat their ass. Everybody, get in the comments. Let's set up a day where we're National Fuck White People every day.
Yeah, this guy is so proud. He doesn't care if they're women. He doesn't care if they're old. He doesn't care who they are. He's like, let's just set up a day and do this. This is how ridiculous this is, that they're willing to go ahead and put this out there in public like this.
Seriously, we just beat them up. Just walk up to them and be, yeah, shit's about to change whether they know it or not. They talking all this shit online, this racist shit, but the reality, they gonna have to get out here with us in a minute. And boy, I can't wait the day we beat the fuck out these crackers. They don't stand a chance. I just can't wait to take these hands. Oh, it's about to be soon. Good job, y'all. Let's set a day we do that to their kids more. I hope their kids rotten in hell. Matter of fact, I wish I knew where the little white boy grave was so I can go spit on that bitch. Dig him up, smack him up again, stab him up again, put his ass back in there. That's the day where we just beat their ass, y'all. Let's get them.
Yet the left goes ahead and says that there's no such thing as black on white racism because they don't have institutional power or authority or whatever. They say that it doesn't exist. The fact that this kind of content exists out there and is so proudly proclaimed tells me that the opposite is true. That for the longest time, generally speaking, people with lighter skin have been more restrained on this than maybe we should have been in a lot of ways. Let's go ahead and hear the next one. And I'm gonna go ahead and get the volume set up ahead of time. That way, hopefully the volume settings will be good for you guys. Let's take a look.
I'm dancing, you ain't gonna do shit. 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 I'm dancing, you ain't gonna do shit.
This kind of reminds me of when I was little and somebody would tell me, hey, don't touch me. And then you go ahead and you like get right up on them and you go, well, I'm not touching you. I'm not touching you. And like I'm pretty sure most of us have had this experience before where they're like, somebody sets a line and you go all the way up to the line. And unless somebody's going to punch you in the mouth or something, like sometimes you don't respect that line. And in this clip, there is no respect going on. In fact, this is rampant disrespect that is happening. And so when people are so proud to just act in such a disrespectful manner to one another in society, this kind of stuff happens. And this kind of stuff is normalized, even though we understand that we wouldn't be doing this in polite culture with one another because there's a risk that someone might pop us in the mouth. And rightfully so. If I was acting like an idiot like this, I would expect a guy to go ahead and step up on me and pop me in the mouth because I'm being stupid. Like that would just be my expectation, that other guys would just handle business when business needs to be handled. So this guy, apparently he got arrested after this event too. He had outstanding warrants for other things that he had done either earlier this week or earlier in the month. absolutely wild that they're just so proud that this stuff is going to happen. We're going to have one more warm-up clip, and then we'll get into the facts and circumstances of the case so that we can go ahead and talk about that. And then we'll have a few more clips where we react to things, and then multiple sides of what's going on. So let's take a look at this guy. Just to set up this clip, this guy apparently wants to call for a mass exodus of Black Americans to Africa. Now let's go ahead and see what he has to say. He might be cooking here. Who knows? And I want you to begin to think about this America and the white people problem that we have. I'm going to make a statement. We know that Martin Luther King, the beginning of his work was all about integration. We do know that later on that did change. Integration has had great benefits. I think now. Integration had great benefits for who? I don't know. That's questions that need to be asked. Now, something else about Martin Luther King is that, yeah, he said, let's judge each other by the content of our character. I think that's a fairly reasonable take. I think that's spot on. We should be judging each other by the content of our character, and our actions should have consequences that are commensurate with the actions that we take. Easy stuff, very straightforward stuff that I think that we can all agree to in common polite society. So let's see what else he has to say. Unless you must stay in America, unless you are supposed to be in the USA. Otherwise, if you're Black, integration has had great benefits. I'm telling you, and I'm saying this as a collective, let's drain this place of its benefits and make our mass exodus and go home and build. Okay, so the idea is that he wants to drain the treasure and bring it to Africa is basically what he said. So that would make sense if the productivity exceeded what they take out of a system. Totally makes sense. If they're the ones that are providing net benefit to a society, I think that his thought process would make a lot of sense. Now, what if he takes this pervasive culture that's going on in the United States and takes it to Africa? Like Don DeMarco is saying, my understanding is also that people from Africa do not necessarily like African Americans. I think that's generally the consensus. But if this guy's going to go ahead and do this, and he's going to say, hey, you know what, let's go ahead and take 13% of the population and let's all take it to Africa, I think that a lot of people would take that deal on both sides of it. And neither side really understands what they stand to gain and what they stand to lose from that arrangement. Let's continue. I repeat, integration has had great benefits for Black people. For some of us. Let's drain this place of its benefits and make our mass exodus and go home and build. See, civil rights did not make white people that are infected with whiteness stop being racist. That's interesting. Interesting terminology. He uses the word infected with whiteness, as if that isn't like a natural part of who we are, unless he is using whiteness as a loaded term to mean something else, which I suspect he is, because based on the way that he is expressing himself, it seems like he has a certain ideology that he's expressing himself from. Let's continue. They still raised racist children that run this country to this day. All right, so never mind all of the systematic barriers that we had taken out since the early 1960s that we've already had multiple generations go through and live life through and go through adulthood through. Never mind all of that. We're just going to go ahead and focus on the past. All right, let's continue.
The Civil Rights Act just made social discrimination federally illegal in key areas of American life. How?
You mean the structural areas of American life, where if you look at structural elements of the law and structural elements of how you live life, employment, housing, things of that nature, those things that if you face oppression on a structural basis, of course you're going to have problems with. Yeah, all of that stuff's been thrown out the window and has been the case since the mid-1960s. Of course it's no longer a problem. But we're still seeing the second and third order effects of problems that have come from a culture where fathers are not in the home, where there is a culture of disrespect for authority, where there is a culture where mothers take over the household, where there's a culture of matriarchy in the household as opposed to patriarchy that has second and third order effects that we're seeing now and have been seeing for the last 40 or so years. Let's continue.
Voting and such. It changed what was lawful, what was punishable, and what rights Black Americans could legally demand and defend.
Now, never mind, most of this happened in the 14th Amendment. And a lot of this further happened beyond that at the 16th and continuing, which happened well before the Civil Rights Act. It was just a continuation of that progress. But there is no recognition that any progress was made. Interestingly enough, the two countries that obliterated and outlawed slavery first were Great Britain, or England at the time, and the United States. But yet, we are always told how bad we are and how horrible we are, even though slavery as an institution had existed since the beginning of time. Let's continue.
And now, those rights at the federal level, there's an attempt to roll them back. Integration has had great benefits. Let's drain this place of its benefits.
So if he's talking about rolling back rights, is he talking about rolling back DEI? I think that's a good thing that we would roll back so that people can go ahead and be evaluated on merit. So how good they are at doing something, not based on representation. Oh, well, we have 13% of the population, so we got to be 13% of the population everywhere, which is a ridiculous concept because then you end up causing harm in so many industries. Let's continue.
And make our mass exodus and go home and build. This land ain't rich enough to hold who you are. You come from a land that flows with milk and honey. They poured you out of that land ancestrally and brought you to a place to where your royalty was not recognized.
Never mind that a lot of the first slavers were Africans and they were Black, and they caught their own people and sold them into slavery. Some of the early slaveholders in the United States were Black. That's just what it is. Yeah, we were enslaved. Yeah, exactly. Whites have been enslaved centuries ago, and they came to the United States through indentured servitude and all of this, and slavery has been an institution for thousands upon thousands of years. But yet we only go ahead and hear about one kind of slavery. That's the only kind that matters, apparently. Let's continue.
Used your Black power, your Black mysticism, your African spirituality, and your physiological superiority.
So he's talking about superiority of the race. Interesting. No guff given to this guy. He can go and say whatever he wants about superiority. But we just go ahead and give him a pass.
To build this country and give everybody reparations except you. Don't believe that America don't give reparations.
Hold up. disproportionately, welfare recipients and recipients of government programs have been African Americans. Now, though, on the whole, whites have received more in terms of welfare spending. However, there are a lot more white people than there are black people. So when you have 13% of the population take on a disproportionate share of net draining effects on the population, there's an imbalance there. Let's continue.
To the tune of billions, just never gave it to us.
Except for welfare and free housing and free food and preferential treatment and hiring.
This country was created to rape, pillage black. So unless you got an assignment.
See, that's a really weird comment to make, that it was created in order to do that. He doesn't have any basis to make that statement and defend it on a logical basis, because it wasn't created for that purpose. People were leaving the old world in exchange for the new world and the opportunities that were available in the frontier and things of that nature. So he can't defend this position. Let's continue.
From spirit or something divine that is telling you to stay here. Your duty is to begin charity at home.
That's interesting. So what do you guys think? Do you guys think that he's cooking here, that maybe there is something to a mass exodus on their part? What do you think the net benefit or detriment to various other people involved in this would be? Like, I think that many of the inner cities would end up being safer as a result of it. I think that crime statistics would go ahead and meet this out pretty well. But what do you guys think? I'd be interested to hear from you guys in the comments. Let's continue. And this is kind of the main event where we're going to go ahead and have CLR Bruce Rivers. He's going to tell us about the Karmelo Anthony murder trial. This is the thing that's been causing all the stir this week, is the guilty verdict of Karmelo Anthony. So let's go ahead and take a look and see what this defense attorney has to say about it. I've seen a lot of videos from this guy. This guy knows his stuff. Let's continue.
And reasonableness. Those are the two words. They didn't come at him with lethal force. Number one, in a self-defense case, the defense has the burden of showing some form of self-defense.
Mm-hmm.
And it just has to be a showing. It doesn't have to be that much. It doesn't even have to be a preponderance of the evidence. It just has to be some showing.
Bruce Rivers, he's the criminal lawyer. Who is he? Bruce Rivers, he's the criminal lawyer. And who is he? Bruce Rivers, he's the criminal lawyer. And what he do? And it's gonna react to all the self-snitching.
Hi, this is Bruce.
All right. So before we get into this, now remember, he is a defense attorney, and he's going to go ahead and break down elements of the law and what are the elements that were required by the prosecution to go ahead and say, and for the defense to say in the furtherance of this criminal case. So he's going to break down the technicalities that may go beyond our common understanding of just common law. And this would be really good to hear from his perspective, what he's got to say. Let's continue.
Rivers, welcome to another episode of Criminal Lawyer Reacts. I'm Bruce Rivers, your board certified criminal defense lawyer, coming to you with my pearl handle pistol cufflinks, which means we're ready for business, right? These were gifted to me by my son and your former content genius, Michael Rivers, God rest his soul. And I mention him at every episode because without him, I wouldn't have this channel. And this is a good therapy for me, really. Because when I'd look behind the camera and he would, I played to an audience of one, and Michael would laugh. And I knew if I made him laugh or if he nodded or something.
All right, he's just talking about
high school
son.
student in Texas .com.
All right, let's see if he gets into it now.
AskALawyer.com marries.
Okay, that's his ad. Let's get to the start.
Okay. Now, this is really a case about self-defense. I'm going to put my wallet away. Anyway, this is really a case about self-defense. Let's recap with this case, how it started. So this was a case where you're in the bleachers, it's a track meet, and it starts to rain. And every team's got their tents, right? My daughter was in track. And I remember, everybody had their little tents and everything's very provincial, right? Oh, go under my tent. I mean, who gives a shit, honestly? Maybe I just don't know the right way to do things. I'm all like, can't we just get along? Let's all just hug it out. I went up to this huge football.
So apparently one of the tents was for one team, one of the tents was for another team, and there was a mixing of where the teams were at, is what the deal was, or at least Carmelo Anthony and his people went to the wrong tent, is what happened.
Player. And it was so hilarious. I think he was a Minnesota Viking, and we were out to dinner, and I knew who he was. I'm not going to mention his name, but he's just giant, right? And my office partner, who's a short little Jewish guy.
All right, we're going to skip that story.
What happened was, so we did a reaction to this, so you might want to go back and look at a little more deep dive than we're going to do here, because this is more of a discussion about self-defense. So he was sitting under the tent of an opposing team or a competing team, and it started to rain, and and he's black. So Karmelo Anthony's a black kid, and a couple of the white kids, McCaff and another kid, told him, you can't sit under our tent. And then depending upon what story you believe, and there's surveillance of it, which I think is good for everybody, to be honest with you. And Karmelo stabs him, and he kills McCaff. The whole case comes down to one word, and one word alone: reasonable. What was?
Yeah, there we go. Okay, so self-defense cases, you have to go ahead and have a reasonable idea that you were fearing for your life and things of that nature, rather than there just being like a pissing match, which is basically what was going on. It escalated, and that's why there was the charges that were levied upon him. Let's continue.
Reasonable under the circumstances. So the opening statements began this week in the teens athlete's fatal stabbing during the track meet, the murder trial of former Texas high school Carmelo Anthony. And it's really, there's all kinds of people at the courthouse that are protesting for the victims, for the defendant. And he faces the charges for stabbing 17-year-old Austin McCaff during the track meet. And it's just a dispute over a tent. The tragic event unfolded at a sporting event meant to celebrate youth athleticism and sportsmanship. Jesus Christ.
I think it's pronounced Metcalf.
Yeah, so basically this whole thing was about sportsmanship, and then it escalated very quickly.
Metcalf?
Yeah.
MCCAFF. It's McCaff.
Okay.
I'm reading it right the fuck here.
Okay.
Stick your finger back in your. This was supposed to celebrate sportsmanship and athleticism. Instead, it turns into a dispute between a black kid and a white kid, which is just so fucking sad, to be honest with you. So the courtroom battle centers on contrasting narratives from the prosecution and defense, okay? The prosecution asserts that Anthony's stabbing of McCaff was a disproportionate, remember that word, disproportionate, and unjustified use of deadly force, framing it as a premeditated and criminal assault. If it was premeditated, he would be charged with murder one. They maintain that even if provoked, the violence was unacceptable and warranting a conviction. I guarantee you this was not a premeditated deal. On the other hand, the defense contends that Anthony was frightened as a teenager who responded instinctively to self-defense after McCaff struck first. They argue that the chaotic conditions during the track meet contributed to a heightened emotional state, leading to a reactionary act rather than a planned attack. So
this is interesting. So having that line of argumentation almost seems like you're not going for a defense, but you're trying to get the charges changed from murder to manslaughter, where you say, hey, I had killed this person in the heat of passion. It wasn't a premeditated thing. I didn't do this thing because I had set out to do it. It's because I was emotional and I just killed the guy. It's an interesting perspective for this attorney to bring about in the defense side, especially when your primary line of defense is supposed to be self-defense. Let's continue.
Sometimes, it's not what somebody did, it's what does it mean legally. And that's what we have in this case, it seems. The outcome will hinge on the subtle nuances, such as timing of actions, the severity of the threat perceived, and adherence to legal standards under Texas law. Now, here's what Karmelo Anthony's problem is. He's black. He's black and they're white. And you're going to have mostly white jurors. And you're going to have conservative white jurors. That self-defense is okay if you're white, not if you're black. And I hate to even say that, but that's a big hurdle that he has. And I've seen this in court before.
Hey, Average Joe. Yeah, I'm going to go ahead and cover that after we talk about the basics of the actual court battle, which has led to a lot of this emotional racial backlash. And then we'll go ahead and react to a couple of clips. But the bottom line is it's pretty bad. And depending on if you are left of center or right of center, your vision and your version of what racism actually is going to be fundamentally different based on how you see it and how you define terms. So that'll be just a little bit later.
Hopefully I'm wrong. I really want to be wrong. And if I'm wrong, fucking I'm wrong. I'll be the first one to admit it. I'm not like some other lawyers who say I'm right no matter what. I hate that shit. But let's take a look at a couple of news clips real quick.
Hello, everybody. I'm Heather Hayes.
And I'm Steve Eager. Within the last hour, a jury has been chosen to decide the closely watched murder trial of Karmelo Anthony.
Let's talk about that for a second. First of all, selecting a jury in a case like this is a high-profile case. This is a case that everybody's heard about. I mean, if I've heard about it, everybody's heard about it, right? Because I'm usually in a bubble. But selecting a jury in this case has got a couple different components to it. One, what is your thought of self-defense? Do you believe in the stand your ground law? Because I believe Texas is a stand your ground state.
It is a stand your ground state here.
Have you heard anything about this case? What are your thoughts about race? Do you believe that the only good cracker is a dead cracker? Or do you believe the opposing view that the only good cracker is a Ritz cracker with some pepper jack cheese on it? So those are the issues, and have you ever had a chance to act in self-defense? Have you ever been mistreated by, and you keep in mind that I come at it from a defense perspective. Okay. I'm not a prosecutor. I've never served as a prosecutor. I never would serve as a prosecutor. The thought of putting somebody in jail is repugnant to me. Okay. I had somebody call me. This is on Chud the Builder. Call me just every name under the book because I said I didn't believe in the death penalty, which I don't. And I don't because, we're the only industrialized Western nation that has the death penalty. You realize that? That's why some places won't extradite to the United States, on death penalty cases unless they take the death penalty off the table. You got to find a juror that can have an open mind and can render decisions based on the evidence and not based upon their prejudices.
Yeah, and this was really tough, too, because they had 3 black people for jury selection. There were a lot that were summoned, but only 3 showed up. They were all teachers. And so the thought behind their dismissal was because they were K through 12 that they thought that they'd be too biased in a situation with students. Which makes sense because it's pretty standard practice all across law. It's not just specific to this case. Maybe he'll get into it.
And when I say prejudices, I don't mean racial prejudice. I mean prejudice against knives, for example, or the use of deadly force, or somebody that's so knee-jerk on one issue or the other. And race is one of them, but the idea I was using the word prejudice in terms of having an open mind.
Yeah, he's talking about whether they have the ability to consider a situation for what it is and not take the glasses that they see the world and not let that dictate how they see the case, as opposed to having the independent ability to look at circumstances and judge it for what it is and how it's presented rather than their own perspective of what it is. That's the difference that he's trying to elucidate here.
We all have our biases.
More than 500 people were on the list of potential jurors, but the jury will not include anyone who is black, despite this case being racially charged.
First black juror I ever got was one of my first trials up in northern Minnesota, where it's all white. How did I get a black juror? Not a clue. But that can have positive or negative implications. It has a negative implication here because he is black. And the black community is going to say he is not judged by a jury of his peers, and you're not entitled to people just like you. You're entitled to jury of the community, and they're chosen randomly. And you can't get.
Yeah, it's not like you say, imagine the idea that you go ahead and expect that a jury is going to be your perfect peers. So are we going to go ahead and say that a doctor can only be judged by doctors? I mean, that's ridiculous. But or is a man only able to be judged by men, or a woman able to be judged only by women? That doesn't make sense. Should a rich person only be judged by rich people? No, clearly that doesn't make sense. So the idea of a jury of your peers is somebody out from your community within the local pool of people that can be called upon to serve as a jury member within your jurisdiction. That's all it is. It isn't any guarantee that any specific peer group is going to be assigned to you, because you can go ahead and look at any infinitesimally small group and try to work from that. And that's why a lot of quotas in employment and things like that don't work, and why DEI has been just a terrible thing, generally speaking, for the United States. Let's continue.
Rid of a juror because they're black or because they're Jewish or any of the protected reasons.
Fox 4's Alex Boyer joining us now. Alex.
Hey guys, good evening. That's right. And I can tell you that a court spokesperson confirmed that there are indeed no black jurors on this panel. And I can tell you that before this jury panel was seated, the defense objected to 3 black women being struck by the prosecution. Now,
so no black jurors selected. Here's the thing. It is not jury selection. That's what it's called, but it's not. It's jury deselection. Okay? Because you get a panel of jurors and you kick them off one by one. So you don't want to.
Yeah, that's the idea, is you get a pool and they try to go ahead and limit it down to 12 plus a pool of alternates is really what the idea is. And so you'll have the defense and the prosecution ask people questions relevant to the case or relevant to your ability to process information, and they'll determine whether or not that's good for your case, and then they'll make a case to the judge as to why they should be kicked off or not.
Fox News junkies on your jury typically, and if the prosecution kicks off or excludes 3 black jurors, they have to have a race neutral reason for doing so. Otherwise, and it's called a Batson challenge. When somebody has a juror that they either exercise a preemptory or a for cause challenge on.
So Batson apparently is a court case where the dismissal of jurors on the basis of race is illegal. And that's what the deal is there. I'm going to go ahead and increase the speed of playback by a quarter to see if we can get through this faster and get the bare bones of what's going on.
And you think, hey, wait a second, that's the only black person. You have no other reason other than they're black or they're Mexican or Hispanic or they're Asian or whatever. And the race is the reason that you struck that juror. They can't do that. Mm-hmm. So what you do is you have a Batson challenge, and then the prosecutor gives a race neutral reason.
Now, the prosecution contended that it was due to the fact that the women were educators, noting that this incident happened at a school function with young students. The defense then pointed out that those were 3 of those were 100% of the available black jurors in what's called the strike zone, adding that the state struck all 3. The judge went out and reviewed their questionnaires and came back and said that the defense's challenge to the 3 jurors being dismissed was denied. The judge said the court found that the state had non-racial means to strike the jurors. Now, background.
Yeah, so that's back to the Batson challenge of trying to go ahead and make sure that people aren't being eliminated just by race. It turns out that they all had very reasonable reasons why they should be kicked off the jury.
Karmelo Anthony, 17 at the time, is accused of fatally stabbing 17-year-old Austin Metcalf last year at a.
So what a dynamic. All white jurors in Texas, in a community that's probably mostly white, and you've got this football star, and all a track star. You don't think that the prosecution is going to paint this real contrast between him and Karmelo Anthony and play on those fears?
Yeah, not only that, but I don't know if you guys know this, but in Texas, football is like insanely big. It is such a big deal, especially high school football. People go crazy about high school football here in Texas. So if you are, a star player on any football team, you have like this elevated level of status that's just pretty insane and difficult to match in high school. Let's continue.
Frisco ISD track meet. Anthony was reportedly sitting under a tent for a school that he did not attend. Witnesses say the two got into an argument and Anthony stabbed Metcalf in the chest. Metcalf died in his twin brother's arms. Police said that Anthony told them he acted in self-defense. Now this case has become racially charged, fueled in large part by online speculation, rumors, and misinformation. On Wednesday, attorneys for both sides got an hour and 45 minutes to question the reduced poll of these potential jurors. They were questioned on their views on a variety of topics, including race, how they felt about serving on this case, and if they would hold it against the defendant if he chose not to testify on his own behalf. The defense also tried to gauge if the potential jurors would be uncomfortable giving Anthony a lower sentence if there is a guilty verdict.
So you can't really do that. You can't ask a juror for kind of a promise that they'll give a lower sentence, but you can ask them about how do you feel about this? How do you feel about that? How do you feel about the death penalty? Those kinds of things.
Yeah, the question wasn't whether there would be a guarantee of a lower sentence. The question was whether they were open to the possibility of a lower sentence. So let's go ahead and make sure that the terms are clear here.
I talked to a jury consultant about the process so far.
It's an excellent team on both sides. I believe Bill Worski has, he's a veteran prosecutor. He's tried some very high-profile cases. And then Toby Shook has been both a prosecutor and a criminal defense attorney. And then Mike Howard is an excellent criminal defense attorney as well. And they, along with the DA, it's going to be a very well-tried case.
And I did speak with Allison Richardson before the jury was sat, so I did not have a chance to ask her about these late-breaking developments. Now, this high-profile case continues to draw supporters and spectators to the Collin County Courthouse. We saw another group of folks demonstrating at the entrance of the courthouse this afternoon. We expect that to continue throughout the trial, which the judge hopes to have wrapped up by the end of next week. And I can tell you that 19-year-old Karmelo Anthony was in court today for the proceedings. He was wearing a suit with a tie and a purple shirt, which is also the color many of his supporters have been wearing. He did take some notes during the proceedings. I can also tell you that there does appear to be some minorities on this jury panel. Again, however, none of them are African-American. Opening statements begin tomorrow at 9 a.m.
So, this business about wearing solidarity colors, a judge would probably frown upon that. You certainly can't wear, a shirt that says free Karmelo or free Karmelo Anthony.
During testimony in the murder trial of Karmelo Anthony, a 19-year-old charged in the deadly stabbing of a fellow teen at a Frisco track meet last year. Andrea Lucia joins us now live.
Yeah, this is really obvious. If you go ahead and are on a jury and you say for whatever reason, I'd have a hard time judging somebody on the merits of the case, but only on the color of their skin. Yeah, I think that's a very reasonable reason to just get them off the jury automatically, because it isn't the color of their skin as a juror that you're concerned about. It's the coloring of their perception and their ability to adequately judge the merits of the case for what it is. Interesting stuff. Let's continue.
Live outside the Collin County Courthouse. Andrea.
In opening statements today, the prosecution said this case has nothing to do with race, but out here.
Bullshit. This has everything to do with race. I mean, it may not have between the parties, but it is now.
Here, it's been impossible to ignore the racial tensions it's ignited among protesters who gathered here at the courthouse throughout the day. Prosecutor Bill Worski did try to keep the focus on what he has described as the unprovoked, unjustified murder of 17-year-old Austin Metcalf. He began his case playing video from the day Metcalf died, breaking it down a few seconds at a time. It shows people gathered under a tent as rain was coming down during the Frisco ISD track meet. You can see them start pushing each other and then scattering quickly. Defense attorney Toby Shook argued the video doesn't show what happened or who started the argument.
So here's
So before he gives commentary, this is really interesting because how I talked about how football, high school football is incredibly crazy in Texas. And the fact that they had such good surveillance equipment here at this stadium is an indication of how much money we spend on Texas football stadiums for high school football, especially for like larger schools. So the fact that they had so much surveillance equipment is like a testament to, like, one, is good for the case on both sides. That way they have access to evidence from this. Now, it also goes to show how much we love football here in Texas. And then also, Cheap Seats, thanks so much for the subscription, and thanks for the like. Appreciate it. If you like what you're seeing here, by all means, go ahead and hit the like button. Would appreciate it. It'd be helpful for the algorithm. Let's continue.
This video is the piece of evidence in this case, critical. And it probably will help the defense, because you can't avail yourself of self-defense if you're the provocateur. So if you're the one starting the fight, you can't avail yourself of self-defense. So to the extent that
that's something to be interesting. That's very interesting, right? So if you go ahead and you start a fight and then you escalate and the other person is killed as a result, you can't use self-defense as your basis for your defense. So that's really interesting that they go ahead and take that weapon right off the table, and that we have this footage that could go ahead and give us a limitation to the left and right boundaries of what arguments can be made in this case. So great to point out.
Video would show the other guys putting their hands on Karmelo first is critical to any kind of self-defense theory.
That day, the prosecution, though, has promised the jury they will hear from eyewitnesses, and it's denied any claim that this was an act of self-defense. In its opening statement, the defense, meanwhile, introduced us to Karmelo Anthony, describing him as an A student who was holding down 2 jobs while also serving as captain of the high school football team. It claims that he went into that tent to get out of the rain, and that it was the victim, Metcalf, who started the argument.
Yeah, so they go ahead and show his character. They're trying to go ahead and show him as like the best of the best and all of that, and how, hey, look, this guy, he's so good. Why would he do this? Why would he be in this situation? So that's an interesting piece to this opening statement that the defense provides.
So when you look at this case, it's really a simple case, but it's not, because it's going to come down to a judgment call. Did the actions of Mr. Anthony meet a reasonable test? And so here's what happens with self-defense. First of all, let's just talk about whether he's going to testify or not. So when you look at this case, you've got a confrontation between 2 people. Little tiny things will make a difference. For example, if in Minnesota you have to have a duty to retreat, but you don't have that in Texas. Mm-hmm. But if he says,
So when he was talking about stand your ground, in Texas, there's no duty to retreat like there would be in Minnesota where he practices law. But here, you're welcome to go ahead and stand your ground. And if somebody steps up to you, you can defend yourself. And you're not going to have legal problems with a self-defense claim, provided it is justified, reasonable, and proportional.
Instigates to say, okay, make me, or something like, if you got to leave, make me leave. And they puts his hands on him. Is that him instigating the fight? So, what do we look at? Number one, in a self-defense case, the defense has the burden of showing some form of self-defense. Mm-hmm. And it just has to be a showing. It doesn't have to be that much. It doesn't even have to be a preponderance of the evidence. It just has to be some showing. Then the burden shifts to the state, to the prosecution. And the burden then shifts so that they have to prove that he did not act in self-defense. So they have to disprove one of a few different elements. When you look at this, and supposedly that after the fact, they were trying to figure out who did this, and he admitted that he did it. Well, that's what you're going to do in a self-defense case. You can't have a self-defense case and say I didn't do it. But here are the basic elements, and it changes a little bit with each jurisdiction. But you can't be the aggressor. The threat of danger or unlawful physical force must be immediate. And here's the big one, and the prosecution mentioned this in their opening: proportionality. The defense force that you use must match or be proportionate to the level of the threat. Now, if they're up in bleachers, and you ever felt uneasy in bleachers? I know I have. You walk down, and if somebody pushes you, you could get hurt pretty easily.
What's really interesting about how the defense framed this case was because they were almost locked into trying to defend the actions of Karmelo Anthony based on his own testimony that it provided to law enforcement, because he plainly stated that he was the one that did it. This is what I did it with. He gave all the information that was needed to go ahead and show that he had done the thing. So because he had already admitted that he had done the thing, even if he doesn't and didn't testify on his own behalf, his statements and his words would be used in a court of law against him. And so in order to get in front of this is basically his line of defense. So because of the actions that he took, like, I don't know if you guys can see this very well, but in this guy's video, he's got stop self-snitching, right? Because he talked to the police in this way, he limited his defense attorney's ability to protect him or to use other lines of argumentation. But because of what he had said in to the police, that locked him into a self-defense case or a self-defense defense against murder charges. Let's continue.
Avoidance duty to retreat, which we don't have here in this case. So that's eliminated. And reasonableness, your belief that you were in danger and the amount of force used was necessary to be viewed as a reasonable and ordinary prudent person would in the same situation. So those are the elements. And the prosecution has to disprove at least one of those beyond a reasonable doubt. Let me rephrase that. It's sort of presumed when you get the instruction, it's presumed that the defense of self-defense is proven. Okay. So it's up to the prosecution to disprove one element. And if they disprove any one of those things that I just read you, then you're going to have a situation where the self-defense is not there.
That's basically what happened, is that because self-defense has a bar, and if you go ahead and violate any of the elements of the self-defense doctrine, then all of a sudden you are opened up to liability. And we understood what the circumstances were. Yes, Karmelo Anthony did kill Austin Metcalf. That's what happened. And the question is, what is the severity? What's the mens rea? Or what's the criminal? Was there criminal intent? Was there premeditation? Those are the other elements that'll come up. But in self-defense, as a defense against murder charges, you have to meet some guidelines, and the prosecution's job is to poke holes in those guidelines for the individual circumstance. Let's continue.
And it's a not guilty, or no, it's a guilty, right? So, and the big one here is proportionality and reasonableness. Those are the two words. They didn't come at him with lethal force. No, did he view it as something more than just a shove because he's in the bleachers and because of things that they were saying back and forth? We're gonna kick your ass. We're gonna pound your dick in the dirt. Whatever they fucking say. I don't know who talks like that, but I've heard it someplace. Like Robert's talking like that. Anyway, so that's what this case is going to hinge on. Now, does he have to testify? I don't know. But usually you kind of have to testify in self-defense cases. You have to communicate to the jury what your fear was, what your threat level was, and you have to, you don't have to fear that you were going to die. That's a misnomer. You just have to fear great bodily harm or death. I didn't know. They grabbed me. All I wanted to do was get out of the rain. He seems, this Karmelo Anthony seems a little sympathetic. After the fact, he asked, is he going to be okay? It wasn't, this fucking premeditated shit is just going to go out the window. I can't imagine that, what was he premeditated? And mind you, premeditation can happen in an instant, but for them putting their hands on him, would he have stabbed anybody? He doesn't strike to me as the kind of person that is psycho or, mass killing. That's not him. Or at least I don't see it. Anyway, what would I do as a lawyer? I'd want to humanize him as much as possible. And he's not a big guy. He's a skinny little guy. And I would play that difference between these two brothers who are big, strong football players with Karmelo Anthony, who is just a skinny little fast track guy. And then I would also play up his life. What was he like? Did he have a job? Was he a good student? Did he, I'd play up all those things. And then you make it unlikely that he had anything premeditated, but likely that he feared for his life. That's how you defend this case. Tragic that he lost his life. It was so fucking unnecessary to put your hands on Karmelo Anthony. It just was. And even more unnecessary that he was stabbed. Anytime I see
that would be the way to go ahead and spin the story, depending on what side of the ball you're on in this case. So there's a lot to be said here. Let's let him finish it out, and then he's finishing out what he would do if he was the defense attorney. Is the section of the video here, and then we'll take a look at some of the reactions that have come from the guilty verdict.
The loss of a young life is just so sad. Go back and watch my initial reaction to this. because I think you'll find that I praise the father in this case because the father expressed remorse, or not remorse, but grace and reserve, and he didn't jump on all this. He was kind, and he was sad. I mean, his fucking son is dead. And nothing worse than losing your child. I can speak on authority on that motherfucker. We'll continue to watch this, but look for those two words: proportionate and reasonable under the circumstances. So here's my analysis of this. I don't know what's going to happen. He's got a shot at self-defense. I don't think. So
what's interesting about this is this video came out basically after just before the verdict was read. I think that the production team just couldn't get this his view on opening statements out fast enough, which put him behind the ball on a couple things. I wonder if he's got an update for the verdict. I think that would be interesting. Videos, latest, why Karmelo is guilty. We're going to just do, oh boy. Let's see if we can't find just his summary of this. Because
somebody's just putting their hands on you.
A 45-minute video is a little bit much. Let's see. Comparing cases, closing thoughts. Let's see. Your comments, jury instructions, not testifying, jury selection. Let's look at jury instructions, and we'll start there.
Fucking blade in the chest. You didn't say that, but let's take a look at the jury instructions, because that's where the rubber really meets the road. So you have the standard ones: presumption of innocence, burden of proof. Then you have the elements of manslaughter. And manslaughter that's that heat of passion that they were trying to argue. That didn't work. And mental state in terms of definitions. A person is justified in using deadly force against another if the person would be justified in using force against the other, and when and to the degree the person reasonably believes the deadly force is immediately necessary to protect himself against others, or use or attempted use of unlawful deadly force. If that's the instruction, I can see why he was convicted. You can win a case just by formulating the right instructions. I've done that on civil cases. It's easier on civil cases. There's a committee, that is assigned to write them. I've got them right there in those green books. You most certainly have your opinions as to what happened. The problem that I have with this is that you don't have deadly force. I mean, they didn't punch him.
Oh, wait, you don't have deadly force? He got stabbed. Maybe he's talking about something else. Let's let him talk it through.
They didn't repeatedly beat him. You look at the George Zimmerman trial. What's the difference there? The difference there is he was getting his ass kicked, and he had visible injuries, and Karmelo Anthony didn't have any injuries. So
oh yeah, that's a big deal, right? So when George Zimmerman was not guilty and he had a self-defense claim, you could see that he had injuries on him. So it made it reasonable to show that he was afraid for his life and things of that nature, which justified the use of force. Whereas in this case, Karmelo Anthony didn't have any of that. So it was difficult for them to weave a story that would lead to that. Let's see what he's got for comparing cases. This would be interesting.
So, which I think is still quite a bit. So if you look at some of these other cases, like the George Zimmerman case, like the Rick Chow case, they happen in various vignettes of life, right? I think I've told you guys before, I had a case where my client shot his brother-in-law in the leg, and he thought he was going to come and he said, I'm going to kick your ass. And he looks at it, and my client was holding a gun. He says, what are you going to do with that? And starts walking towards him. Well, somebody's doing that and not really afraid that you have a gun. What are you going to fucking do, right? And he shot him in the leg, and that was it. And then he put the gun away. It's like, okay, now what? And in that situation, we got a hung jury. And the judge in that case said you could try this case 15 times and get 5 hung juries, 5 acquittals, and 5 guilty verdicts. And so we wound up settling it for a misdemeanor. This all comes down to that one word. Was it reasonable? And too bad that, an adult didn't step in here. Although maybe we would have had 2 dead people. Who knows? I feel bad for Anthony because I think he made a really fucking bad decision. I don't think it was a bad decision to go into the tent, but I think it was a bad decision to use a knife. I don't think it's premeditated. I just fucking don't. And why didn't Austin go get a teacher? Why didn't Austin put his hands on him? And something.
Yeah, but then you go ahead and look at the difference between Minnesota, where he practices law, and Texas, where in Texas we don't have a duty to retreat. right? Yeah, he could have gone and told on him and said, hey, he's under our tent. But that, like, reasonably in the moment, we could go ahead and Monday morning quarterback this all day. But the facts are the facts. This is the thing. He had a knife. He used it to deadly efficiency, killed the guy. Why are we going ahead and, why are we calling this an unfortunate decision? When you bring out a weapon with the intent to use it, it's not unfortunate. It isn't a mistake. You are making choices and you are showing your weapon and your intent to use deadly force when you do that. It's just like in the military, where we go ahead and you point your weapon down so you're not flagging people as you're continuing, so that you don't have accidental discharges and accidentally get people shot. We don't want that to happen. So and when we go ahead and do like gun safety classes, don't point the weapon at anybody you're not willing to kill it. That's just what it is. But we have a respect for human life. We understand that there's human dignity involved. And when that respect is not a two-way street, we have problems. That's why we have issues with an orderly society right now. Is we have groups of people that respect the rule of law and respect order and understand that law and order are required for a well-functioning society. And then you have people that go ahead and buck against that trend and will go ahead and fight against it to their last breath because they just want to go ahead and have a better time of things. Let's let them close this out.
People can be hypersensitive to getting your hands put on. But guess what? That's not the standard. You know, there's an eggshell skull rule, right? Where if you hit somebody and they have a paper thin skull and you cause brain damage, you're responsible for that damage. And the reason I bring that up is because it's not like that here. Just because you have the ultra sensitive nature, that's not what you're judged by. It's what would a reasonable person do under the circumstance.
Yeah, exactly. Your personal proclivities are not the thing that is being judged. The question is, what would a reasonable man do? That is the nature of the test. And so if you are super sensitive to things and you lash out emotionally, that doesn't protect you in court unless you're going for like an insanity defense. Once again, not an attorney, but I've seen enough of this stuff happen where there are lines in the sand that you don't cross, and there's certain things that you make sure that you do as a part of a orderly society. And once you move past those lines, you have a lot of risk involved.
And that's just some random person that you pull out of the air. And that's when the jury looks at it and says, okay, what would I do? You know what I mean? It's just fucking sad all the way around. And what's even worse is how this is really divided a community, you know, and you hear some comments where you don't even come walk into this area if you're white, blah, blah, blah. You know, we don't fucking need that. So to all you.
Yeah, because that definitely doesn't help the situation when you go ahead and inflame things, which we're going to go ahead and see in some videos here right after this. Some of the inflammatory stuff that was going on, and I imagine will continue to go on.
Naysayers that say I don't know what the fuck I'm talking about. I'm a defense lawyer, so I look for the good. You know, I look for the way for the acquittal. I'm not a prosecutor, and I don't think this is so one-sided that it's that obvious. It kind of is because you got a knife with an unarmed person, or you got somebody who's 50, 60 pounds heavier. They're up in the balconies or in the bleachers. I don't know. You know, you could get a different jury and they could make a completely different scenario, you know, different verdict. So the next step is for everybody's actions to be reviewed by an appellate lawyer. So you've got the actions of the lawyer himself. You've got the actions of the judge, the actions of the prosecutor. So if there are any rare irregularities in there that implicate either constitutional rights or his right to a fair trial, in other words, you're going to have a new trial. I did see some things and questions in there that I'm like, how the fuck was that even asked? You don't ask a juror questions about prison, and you don't ask a lay witness their opinion as to whether he's guilty of murder. That's testifying as to the ultimate fact in the case. And maybe that's okay in Texas law. Wouldn't be okay here. And each jurisdiction is just a little bit different. So we'll see you next time here on Criminal Lawyer Reacts. Don't be too hard on me, please. I don't care.
Nah, he'll be all right. This guy is well-heeled. He's got a great following. He's got what? 1.45 million, almost 1.5 million subscribers. Dude is doing great. Let's go ahead and see some of the reaction on Twitter. So what we got here is there's a new, let's see. Let's get this so you can see it. There's a new disturbing social media trend of BLM activists posting edited images of themselves urinating on Austin's grave. You can't get much lower than this. Make these POS scum famous. Look at this. They're just photoshopping themselves as if they are urinating on this guy's grave. Freaking disgusting. And like only in our society where people just have no respect for the sanctity of most things in life does this kind of thing happen. Outrageous. Let's see some of the comments on this. Look how racist whites forget how the deaths of black people have been turned into memes several times, but it's all freedom of speech, right? And then they got ratioed. You know, they're just trying to go ahead and groiper these things. Let's see what do we got. All I see is water. Okay, yeah, some racist stuff, but the racist stuff apparently is getting a lot of reaction. If you don't let us kill you, you're racist. I like that one because that was a video from another. I tried to look for this video. I could not find it. But yeah, what is this nonsense? We're just going to go ahead and urinate on people's graves? That's disgusting. Let's move on to the next deal. End wokeness. Karmelo Anthony supporting. What do I tell my 5 boys? What do we do now? Let's see. Let's see what she has to say about this. It's only an 18-second clip.
What do you want us to do? What do you want us to do at this point? What? I'm lost for it. I don't know what to do. I got 5 boys. I don't know what. I ain't got nothing to tell them no more. You can't walk away no more.
Rest in peace, Trayvon Martin. Let me ask you this right now. I hear.
How about this? Don't murder people. How about this? Don't stab people that haven't threatened you and your life and your livelihood. How about this? Be a good member of society and know where you should be and where you shouldn't be. And if someone asks you to leave, then maybe you should leave. And if somebody asks you to stay, maybe you should be concerned a little bit. There's a lot of things you could tell your boys. Don't be criminals. That would probably be a good thing to tell them. Let's see. Don't murder. Is that what they said? Let's see what else we got. Are they supposed to ignore their MF and genetics? How are they supposed to get street cred if they can't be killing people? Okay, yeah, that's pretty funny. All right, let's see. The Babylon Bee says, nation shocked as jury rules you cannot stab someone in the heart for no reason at all. Okay, that's one way to frame the case. What else we got here? This guy absolutely nailed it 5 hours before the actual verdict came down. I practice law in Collin County, Texas. Karmelo Anthony will be convicted and sentenced to life in prison, as he should. He murdered that boy because he was raised to hate white people and to view himself as a victim in every situation. He didn't end up getting life in prison, so that's a thing that he got wrong on this one, but there's something there. Let's see. And then there's this crazy guy again, just jumping and hollering and hooping. It's just wild. And then we got Thomas Sowell quote, when people get used to preferential treatment, equal treatment seems like discrimination. Yeah, that's what it looks like here. And then let's continue down before we move on to the next clip. In 2015, you're racist. And then the guy's like, wait, what? And then in 2026, you're a racist. F off is what they say now. Oh, no, he got charges, but he didn't get life in prison. That was the question. The question was whether he was life in prison. I think he got 30-something years. We can look that up right quick. Let's see. Karmelo Anthony, guilty verdict, punishment. Let's see what he got. 35 years is what he was sentenced to, according to ABC News. Okay, seems pretty straightforward. You're a racist. Wait, what? You're a racist. F off. Yeah, that's basically what's going on now, is that just like misogynist, just like bigot, just like homophobe, all these words that the left loves to use are losing their effectiveness. We've come to realize now that those are just ways to shut people up and not actually saying anything as a point of fact. And so now people are just like, we're tired of it. We are so tired of being called, things for just standing up for what's right, or just standing up for what we believe in, or just having an opinion on things. We are so tired of this crap. Let's continue. What else do we got? Oh, this thing from the Knicks. All right. So this happened not too long ago, but this is just because someone that was the employee here at Five Guys said that they were a Spurs fan. Let me go ahead and adjust the volume up, and let's see what they have to say.
I'm not doing that. I'm not doing that. Nah, you Gucci, gang, you Gucci. You Gucci, gang. Oh! Nigga, they not attacking us. Oh, they killing him. Oh!
So they are filming this. They are posting this publicly. They are proud that this stuff is happening. And they are doing this just because this guy likes a different basketball team. Only because he likes a different basketball team. Right? Notice that he's also black, so that's not the issue. Black on black crime is by far and away bigger than anything. The highest source of violent crime against blacks is blacks themselves. We can go ahead and pull up the stats on that. But this just goes to show that just like thoughtless tribal mentality is common and will cause people to get beat for just like crazy things. If you don't follow me on X, by all means, go ahead and follow me. I'm at the Heroes Forge on X. Go ahead and take a look, and you might see some cool stuff from me. Let's move on to the next deal. All right, so a lot of people have been talking about segregation and trying to resegregate blacks from whites. Anytime whites want to go ahead and separate themselves from blacks, it is called racism. Anytime blacks want to separate themselves from whites, it's like, oh, hey, that's perfectly fine and dandy. It's all good. There's no problems here. Let's go ahead and take a look at Long Beach School District in California hosts a segregated blacks-only graduation. Totally acceptable for them to do this. No problem whatsoever. Let's see what the comments have to say on this one. It says, I see no problem with this as long as we can too. Why not? That's the issue. That is exactly the issue, is we can't do that without substantial backlash. That's the issue here. Next, as long as there's an all-white ceremony too, who cares? Yeah, but that's not happening. It just doesn't happen. It would be ideal if that could be the case, because then we can go ahead and say it's fair on both sides. There is no disproportionality. Both sides get separate but equal is something that people would say in the Jim Crow eras, and that's what people would rally against, which is why they were forcing integration for a long time during the civil rights era. But now they're trying to do the exact opposite, but make sure that they're in a preferential position. Let's move on to the next one. This time is, why are black people angry about the Karmelo Anthony verdict? And this is black people in the 1990s when O.J. Simpson got away with murder. Look at them. They're so excited about it. Yeah, I mean, it's a double standard for sure. And it's almost like there's a tribal mentality. It's, oh, well, if you're a part of our team, I don't care what you did as long as things don't go bad for you. And I think this goes on both sides of the aisle, and I think this is where people get things wrong. I think, like, we should judge people based on what they did, their behaviors, the content of their character, the things that they say are reasonable things to judge people on. But judging people just by their shade of melanin is ridiculous. Let's see. We got another one on, so many of them are calling for segregation now. Let's go ahead and change the outlay for this. Her words, if we had segregation, none of this would have happened. All right, let's see what she has to say on this one. Let's raise the volume.
If we had segregation still, none of this would have happened. He wouldn't have had no interactions with any white boy because we would have been in an all-black school. The all-white jury that put him up wouldn't have been a thing. We need an all-black jury. But when I say bring back segregation, it's a problem.
The problem is if it doesn't go both ways, right? So she is proposing that we should go back to segregated society. And I think a lot of people would be open for that. The problem is it is never a two-way street. There is a unilateral demand on one side and then a double standard on the other. That's the issue at hand here. And let's see what the comments have to say about this one. Let's see. Liberia was built for them. You should go home. Statistics show, regardless of income level, they're still a threat. Okay. Yeah. Let's see what else we got here. It worked. They had their spots. We had ours. Government did this to us. Yeah. Diversity was forced at gunpoint. Let's see. What else we got? They had to force segregation under the threat of death. Marines of the 101st Airborne jabbed white kids with bayonets to force them to attend school with blacks. Anyone interested in the brutal violence followed desegregation in public schools can read Common Ground, Turbulent Decade in the Lives of Three American Families in 1985. That's wild. So they would force them by threat of violence to attend the schools. That's why I'm down for homeschooling. Stay out of my front door. Let's move on to the next one. All right, this is an interesting one. This is a radio host who falsely states that black protesters outside the trial were not shouting racial slurs. They totally were. And she says the verdict makes her think about moving to Ghana, but she intends to stay and fight until she gets reparations. She wants 40 acres and a mule and the check. Back to the idea of reparations. They've received their reparations in the form of welfare and in the form of public assistance and things of that nature. Even though no person today ever owned slaves that exists. Nobody that currently lives today was ever a slave in the United States, and nobody who is living in the United States has ever owned slaves. So this is retarded on its face. And this has been the case for several generations now. But let's see what she has to say. Maybe she might be cooking a little bit. She's got 5 minutes. We'll go ahead and just have the playback speed at 1 1/4. See if we can't see what she has to say quickly.
He is still in county jail in Collin County, Texas, which has probably got their share of white supremacists. We saw them outside the court. And I saw this news reporter talking about the Karmelo Anthony case, and she was saying that there were crowds of people yelling racial slurs at each other. No, that's not right. The black people were not yelling racial slurs at the white supremacists.
See, that's the difference, though, is there's a different standard for what constitutes a slur, right? Is black people could go ahead and call white people crackers all day long and nobody's going to bat an eye. But as soon as you levy the N-word, all of a sudden people get up in arms and get crazy. So that's the difference, and why this double standard across all the lines is a problem in our society. Let's continue.
They were calling them fascists. They were calling them racists, but they weren't calling them saltines or any other racial slur.
Only good cracker is a dead cracker.
Oh, hey, look, this guy caught on video saying racial slurs. How about that?
Only good cracker is a dead cracker.
The racial slurs were coming in one direction only.
One direction only, hey? I guess video evidence disproves that.
Definition of a hate crime. Definition of a hate crime. Understand, the reason I'm saying that is because this both sides thing. It's giving Donald Trump. Remember that there's fine people on both sides? That's not accurate reporting.
It is accurate reporting, and if you go ahead and change the narrative to suit your perspective, you're going to have serious problems when the truth is brought to light, and that's exactly what's happening here.
It's not accurate reporting. And again, you know, the Associated Press has a picture of the young person who tragically lost his life in this encounter after aggressing on Karmelo Anthony. And they have an old picture where he looks skinny, which is crazy because I've seen the picture of how he looked that day, and he was a big, scary looking guy.
Yeah, and so he still didn't deserve to get stabbed. There's nothing that you can say to justify this. But yet, because of the color of one's skin in this case, that's all that matters in this tribal affinity culture. And that's a problem, because if we can't just look at people's attitudes, behaviors, and what they actually do and provide them commensurate consequences for their actual things that they do, that is a problem in our society. And it's a problem in terms of law and order.
They will appeal. I pray that they will get different lawyers. And again, the only person they had at the penalty phase was the mom begging for mercy on her son, which is crazy because, of course, any juror, any judge is going to say, well, you're the mom. Of course you are going to miss him. Of course you are going to beg for mercy. We need to see the community.
And yeah, there's going to be appeals. So they're going to go ahead and see if anything was procedurally wrong with either attorney, with the jury, with the judge. They're going to try to look at every angle to get this case overturned. However, they may have a hard time getting a proper attorney for that. We'll get into some of those details later.
And for some unknown reason, those coaches, those other kids, the family, how about the family of the child whose life he saved from drowning? None of those folks spoke on his behalf. And he was sentenced to 35 years in prison for what should have been a self-defense case. And
it was a self-defense case. That's what they tried. That's exactly what they tried. And okay, all right. This lady is commenting on things that are outside of her depth. It was a self-defense case. That's the case that they were trying to make to get him to either go down to manslaughter charges or to be acquitted of this act entirely. The whole basis of the defense was self-defense, and it failed miserably. I mean, there were just elements that got poked holes in, and that's just what it is. And this lady is so ideologically sold out that she's unwilling to entertain the possibility that there is merit in the other side of the case, especially since the prosecution in our criminal court environment has a generally higher bar to meet in terms of prosecuting crime than the defense has in defending crime. Let's continue.
You know, I've spoken a lot on this. It's weighing on my spirit because these are the things that make it so hard to love America. They make me want to leave. I remember when I was in Ghana one time, and I was talking with Levin C. and some other folks, radio people in Ghana.
Yeah, so this is interesting. So we got someone hopping in and wants to go ahead and be upset about things. That's fine. Now, here's the thing. A lot of these people will also say that the jury was all white, which is factually inaccurate. They had people of different races. It wasn't all just white people. So you can go ahead and say these things, and you can claim that it's all racist. But the thing is, every step of the way along this trial, from jury selection and things of that nature, the defense rightly attempted to get them to disqualify any jurors that were disqualified from the case that were black. They gave it a try. They were like, hey, you can't do that. And they said, you can't meet the legal liability standards of the Batten case. And unfortunately for them, that wasn't the case. They were able to justify a jury disqualification on the basis of something other than race. For most of them, it was the basis of they were educators and they may have a biased perspective on the case. That's just what it is. Let's continue.
And somebody asked us, police kill black people in America, don't they? And I said, yeah, they do. And they said, well, why don't you move? And it put everything in perspective. And obviously, Karmelo is not in jail for directly anything to do with police. But the fact that our justice system is so unfair, the fact that Kyle Rittenhouse carries a gun across state lines, murders 2 people at a protest, and gets off scot-free as self-defense.
Yeah, he was actually getting beaten up and chased and all of this other stuff. And it was on video. That's just what it is. A very different thing.
But a child, a 17-year-old who is shoved and menaced while he's minding his own business, who doesn't mean to kill someone, but stabs them one time and runs away and then tells police what happened and inquires about the well-being of the other child.
That's why he was locked into a self-defense is because he had told the officers what had happened. He told them, I stabbed him. That's what I did. So because he didn't keep his mouth shut about certain things, he lost structural positions of defense that his attorney could have used to protect him in the case. Because he said the things that he said, it limited the scope of what his lawyer could use to protect him. And that's the issue. It isn't even about race at that point. It's a matter of when you talk to the police about certain things and you are put on tape saying these things, it's going to be used in court against you. And it's just a reality of the situation.
That child gets 35 years in prison. The fact that there is such a stark, different standard for black people, black children in this country makes it so hard to love America. And it does make you think, well, if I was in Ghana, everybody would be black. Most everybody. If I was in Tanzania. But my ancestors fought and died for this place. Our ancestors built the White House. Our ancestors laid the foundation for this country. And
which is a pretty radical claim. It's like, hey, we built America. Well, no, that's not how that happened. You can go ahead and make the claim, but it's disprovable.
I want my 40 acres and the mule and the check. And so what does that leave us with?
Well, right now, it leaves you with LBJ's Great Society. It leaves you with welfare spending. It leaves you with the highest incidence rate of fatherless homes in the United States. It leaves you with the highest incidence rate of single motherhood in the United States. All of these things where you have grown a dependency on a government as opposed to a father to guide the family has led to cultural issues that have pervaded generation after generation. And honestly, fatherlessness and single mother households are causing problems increasingly for other races as well. This isn't something that's unique to the Black community by any stretch of the imagination. It's just that it's more pronounced in that community because they've been kicking the men out of their community earlier than others have. It wasn't until no-fault divorce was a thing that you really started to see it happening more in terms of whites. So let's go ahead and continue.
Leaves us with stay and fight. Team stay and fight. Fight for justice. Free Karmelo. Justice for Cyrus. Justice for Elijah. That's what it leaves me with. It leaves me with mourn, be sad, be angry, do what you got to do, and then get up and keep fighting.
Yeah, and like there's something to be said about the radical speech on their part and, you know, how they frame things so their community can have support. But I think that there's something else to be looked at is, hey, let's go ahead and figure out what else they're saying in the Twitter sphere. Here's some more stuff that's been floating around.
He's 10 years old, and we live in a cruel world this day and time. The world has always been cruel, but today even more. It was self-defense. It was fuck around and find out. You fucked with the right person and you found out. Sorry, it had to be that way. You shouldn't.
Yeah, so that's the deal. Is you're the one that's bearing a lethal weapon in a environment where it shouldn't have been, and there you go. That's their excuse. Let's continue to see what else she has to say.
I never fucked with that little boy. And like I said, I have a 10-year-old son, and he goes outside, but I make sure he always have something on him to protect him, whether it's his cell phone, a sock of batteries, whatever I give him.
A sock of batteries. So this woman is sending her child out into the world with a cell phone and a sock of batteries and saying, good luck. I don't know. There may be more to this. Hopefully so. I don't have high hopes of it.
To protect himself, because he should be able to go outside and play like a normal kid.
That is true. Regardless of what race you are, you should be able to go out and play like a normal kid and enjoy your youth and childhood, provided that you're not destroying the things of others, provided that you're not causing property damage. You should have a reasonable expectation of being able to play out in the yard and all of this kind of stuff. That's a totally reasonable expectation. However, when you treat everything like war, you're going to have problems as a result.
Without some little Billy, Bob, or Jimmy coming to fuck with him. Y'all got to teach y'all kids to stop messing with people just because of privilege.
Oh, it goes back to privilege. Okay, sure. That's not really sock of batteries. So you get a sock and you fill it with batteries so that you can go ahead and whack people with it. Like a club or like a flail is basically what she said. Yeah, that's what she's equipping her son with. A cell phone and a sock of batteries so that it hurts when she whacks or when the kid whacks them.
Now, dude ain't even here no more. But that's his own fault.
All right. That's what this mother is talking about. Let's see what else we got. Oh, this guy. This guy's pretty out there too. Let's see what this guy has to say on Libs of TikTok.
And right off the bat, man, free Karmelo. Straight up. Straight up. I don't give a fuck about no white lives. All lives don't matter over here. Because on the daily, we get killed. And ain't nobody got shit to say. But when one of ours is protecting themselves, they get ambushed. They get threats. They get all of this. Fuck that cracker. We smoking on that Austin Pat pussy. Like, I don't care anymore because it ain't no good in this shit. It ain't nothing good that's in this shit. But they trying to lay the law down, up all that shit. Y'all gotta give it up. Y'all gotta give it up. It ain't over. It ain't over. Free Karmelo, man.
Yeah, so this guy is saying some dumb crap, but let's be honest here. There's a lot of dumb white racists out there too that will just go ahead and say some out-of-pocket crap and not focus on the content of character and things like that. But let's go ahead and look at crime statistics right now. Now that he's talking about, how they're getting hunted down and all that. Let's see, black on black crime statistics in America. Oh, how about let's take a look. Black individuals face disproportionately high incarceration and more likely to be victims of black on black homicide. Okay, yeah, let's take a look. Key takeaways. In 2020, black offenders accounted for 52.7% of arrestees for violent crimes in the United States. Let me go ahead and raise the... Let's zoom in so you guys can kind of see what I'm reading as well. All right, we've got 2021, black individuals were 49.3% of arrestees for robbery compared to 7.9% white arrestees. So this goes back to the idea of per capita. So even though blacks in the United States make up roughly 13% of the population, they are arrested for violent crimes much more than white people are. That's just what it is. A lot of it also has to do with there are a lot more white people than there are black people. So when you have a disproportionate amount of black people committing crime, by comparison, this is how you end up with these kind of statistics. Next up, we got in 2021, black defendants had 6.9% lower conviction rate than white defendants in federal court. That's interesting because if you were to listen to a lot of these people, you would say that the criminal justice system is against blacks compared to white. Let's see, from 2012 to 2021, black defendants faced 7.2% higher probability of being sentenced to death compared to white defendants for similar crimes. Okay, that's an interesting piece of the puzzle. In 2022, black defendants in state courts had 5.4% lower conviction rate than white defendants. So once again, it shows that, hey, apparently they're getting convicted less. So that could be a number of things. It could be that they're being wrongfully arrested, they're being wrongfully accused, or it could be that they've got, there's a number of factors that could cause that to be the case. In 2022, 58.8% of black homicide victims in the United States were killed by black offenders. Almost 60% were killed by their own people. All right, 2025 to 2022, black on black homicide made up 63.2% of all black homicide victims in the US. Crazy. That's over 60%. In 2021, black homicide victims were 4.2 times more likely to be killed by black offenders than by white victims by white offenders. There's a lot of just damning stats on this that is not good when they go ahead and start talking about, everything is so unfair, but nobody really hones in on black crime as a source of problem in the United States. Now, we're going to go ahead and see some more hot nonsense from the courthouse. Let's see what they had to say.
I came out here since you over here want to call this boy a murderer, then we're gonna take the covers off you. Ain't no way in hell that you need to be a damn DA with this foolishness. Did you know? Hold this, please. That there is a 75-page federal lawsuit for sexual harassment of the DA.
So I think it's really interesting that this woman is wearing a shirt that says, "I demand accountability," or generally speaking, accountability is not something that is commonly understood to be a general principle of what women demonstrate on a regular basis.
That was saying that Karmelo Anthony is a murderer. Well, you need to be a registered sex offender, sucker. Let me read.
Yeah, that's interesting because he hadn't been convicted of any of that. So it doesn't make sense because he can't be put on the registry without a conviction, as far as I understand. Not a lawyer, but continue.
Let me read. The pot calling the kettle black cow, but you the whole DA out here. Oh, so you thought y'all was the only one that could go in PACES. And let me explain to you what PACES is. PACES is the database for federal lawsuits. See, we have a research team, baby, that's colder than the media. So let me go ahead and read a little bit of it, show you how disgusting this joke is. After Jane Doe 1 refused defendant Willis, ain't that his name, Greg Willis? Oh, okay. Advances at the Galveston TDCAA conference, he treated her quite differently in the workplace. He began demeaning and berating her. In one closed-door meeting, he told her, "You think like a child, and I would treat you like a child." Defendant Willis likely appreciated the gender slurring that is implicit in a male supervisor telling a female employee that she thinks like a child. Oh, wait a minute, it gets better. Hold on.
Well, if you can't take accountability for your actions, and I mean, I don't know what the circumstances are, but it's very easy to see how someone can accuse somebody of thinking like a child. Because if you don't have recognition for what's going on in yourself, I'm not defending any of these actions by any stretch of the imagination, but shoot, I know a lot of adults that think like children, of different races, of different genders, of all this kind of stuff. Lots of them that cannot handle responsibility and accountability, generally speaking. So it would not be surprising if a similar thing was going on here.
Hold on. More than once, she tried to break free, but he held her tighter. These physical encounters were unwanted and sexual in nature. Jane Doe 1 eventually put in for a position in the Victim Assistance Division and got it in December 2020. This role put her under the supervision of Chief Rickle. With moaning continued the most recent of the sexualized hugs back in April 2022. We got a damn freak for the DA, but you want to talk about Karmelo Anthony. No, we're going to talk about...
That's interesting because they're using this as a way to take attention off of the actual elements of the case. Don't pay attention to what the actual facts and circumstances of the case are. Pay attention to the people involved. It's kind of like when you get into an argument with someone and they say, "Yeah, but you're not like this, so you can't say anything about it." Like women in abortion. Like they say, "Well, if you don't have a uterus, you can't have an opinion." It's like, no, we can go ahead and talk about fundamental good and evil and understand what is right, true, and beautiful and make concerted argumentation based on that. Has nothing to do with who I am as a person, contend with the argument. But this is the kind of thing that they love to do, is distract from the actual facts and look at the content of somebody else. Never mind this. Let's go ahead and see the comments here. "If you don't let us kill you, you're racist." 1.2K likes. Let's see. "They have no clue how low IQ they really are, which is so sad." This brings up what Martin had just said. How do you deal with this kind of low IQ? Generally speaking, in my private life, I don't associate with people with low IQ. So that is how I handle this. And I try to distance myself from people that are low IQ, generally speaking, because we don't have a lot in common in a lot of ways. Like we can't have good conversations. And it makes it difficult to actually cooperate with one another if we can't understand each other and be on the same sheet of music. That's generally how I deal with it, but you might have different ways that you deal with low IQ in your own personal lives. I'd be interested to see what you guys say in the comment section. Let's see. Martin also said, "I see the same in my ex-wife. No accountability, always discriminated against, so they say. So no change of strategy. I believe they are demon possessed. A lot of these loudmouth are." Well, I don't know about demon possession, but I think that they're just trained to not be accountable for their actions. And when nobody holds them to account, they don't have a something that grounds them in reality. That's the thing. If they're not grounded in reality, then reality is never punching them in the face like it does to me. Like, hey, if I step out of line, reality is here to go ahead and tell me that I'm not the big man on campus. Let's see the next thing. Oh, here we go. This is Myron Gaines laughing at a black math student's mental gymnastics on black crime statistics. So this is going into a little bit what we were talking about before. And he says, white people actually commit certain types more than black people per capita. Okay, that's a pretty nuanced argument to make. Let's see what he has to say about it. I'm going to go ahead and adjust volume settings, and let's see what he has.
Do you think that it is true what you said when black people commit the most crime in this country?
Okay, they commit a disproportionate amount of crime, violent crime, in comparison to their representation in the United States. They commit roughly 50 to 56% of the violent crime in the United States, despite being only about, well, for male, 6 to 7% of the population.
Okay, and what citation?
So 6 to 7% of the population. So if you go ahead and see 13% of the U.S. population is African American, roughly 50% of any population is male and half of it is female. That's how you get 6 to 7%. It's half of 13%. Let's continue.
Do you have for that? Because I actually calculated the statistics behind this because I'm a mathematics major, a pure math major. And it shows that when it comes to certain types of crime, white people actually commit certain types more than black people per capita.
Certain types. What are the types? Let's go ahead and figure it out. I'm going to guess white collar crime. I'm going to guess fraud. I'm going to guess things of that nature, having to do with paperwork, not having to do with life and property.
This comes from FBI crime statistics, UCR, census, etc. It comes from all that stuff. So I made a whole tweet about it, you know, where I covered it in detail, but the numbers don't lie, bro. There's a ridiculous amount of black representation in violent crime in relation to their population size in America. This is an irrefutable fact. You can do math and change numbers around and carry one here and do that, but that is the unfortunate reality.
So I'm going to read it here. It says here that when it comes to sexual offenses, 55.1%.
We're not talking about sexual offenses.
Well, you can talk about sexual offenses so long as they're like grape and things of that nature, because that would be considered violent crime, and that would fall under this umbrella. Let's see what he has to say, though.
No, listen to me.
I said violent crime.
Wait, listen to what I said. Okay, so listen to what I'm saying, though. I'm going to address your point. Black people do commit manslaughter and murder more than anyone else. But when it comes to every other category of crime, like, you know, sexual assault, drug usage, white people commit the most.
Once again, drug usage is not considered violent crime. That's not what Myron had said. That's not what the statistics say either on a per capita basis. Let's continue.
Categories, actually.
Okay, they're the majority of the country. Fantastic. Like, you get what I'm saying, bro? Like, this is what I'm saying. Like, okay, cool. They're the majority of the country, so we can make that argument. No one's saying that isn't true.
Okay.
What I'm saying is that there's a minority of people that commit a disproportionate amount of violent crime, okay, which I would argue is a public nuisance and a problem for people. Okay.
Okay, so let's go ahead and take it away from black on white and stuff like that. And let's just look at numbers. If you had 20% of the population committing 40% of the crime, they're committing twice as much crime as they are representative in culture. Now, the numbers in this case are a little bit different. So we can see that there is a systematic cultural problem that is at work here. And what people don't want to address is the culture. They don't want to address things like fatherless homes. They don't want to deal with single family households. They don't want to deal with out of wedlock births. They don't want to deal with a lot of these things. So let's see what they have to say here.
Okay. Like getting robbed, getting shot at, getting stabbed. That sucks. We don't want to deal with that. Okay?
Actually, no.
Perverts suck too, of course. But you're sitting here saying, well, white people actually commit more. Well, yeah, there's more of them.
Let me just say this, right?
Yeah.
I'm bringing this up because violent crime is only one type of crime. There's like numerous other types. And
yeah, but the thing is, if you're coming up to have a discussion and the prompt is limited to violent crime. So the proposition that Myron is making here is violent crime is disproportionately perpetrated by a certain group of people. So why do people worry about the pedophilia that they commit? I don't know what you're talking about. Are you saying that we don't worry about pedophilia? I think pedophilia is terrible and is gross and should be eliminated from every facet of society. But I don't know. Maybe you mean something else. Be interested to see what you have to say.
What I'm telling you now is that the numbers just simply don't agree with you with that regard to that regard.
Okay.
Oh, okay. If you really look at the statistics, white people are killed more by white people than black people. Black people are killed by black people. Mexican. Oh, yeah. Generally speaking, this is the case that interracial crime is much more the case than intra-racial. So like black on black, high. White on white, high. Mexican on Mexican, high. Absolutely. You're cooking here with this, Sean. But when we look at where black on white, white on black, it is disproportionately more black on white violence than white on black. That's basically what the issue that I'm getting at is. But yeah, you're cooking here. Appreciate you, Sean. Let's see. Average Joe. It's crazy that after 300 years within the same country, roughly a century of equality, how is there still such a different culture? Because it is. You have different cultural mores in different societies or different segments of society. For instance, it is very rare to see Asian divorce or Asian motherless or fatherless homes compared to African American homes. There is a huge cultural gap between how we advance our society. For instance, a general rule that goes across the board in father-led homes, and I think most families, generally speaking, but especially in father-led homes, is that I want my kids to have a better life than I had. I want to work hard so I can help my kids have a leg up in life so that my grandchildren can live a better life than I lived. And I think generally speaking, that is the case because and most men think long-term. We think generationally and we think legacy whenever we have means. Now, when we're struggling to make ends meet, then we have a different thought process involved. And when you have whole cultures that are growing dependent on government for their sustenance, for their shelter, for things like that, they no longer rely on themselves to propel themselves and their family forward. They depend on external stimuli as opposed to handling their own needs and propagating their own goals and desires. Let's continue with the video.
Well, you know what? Take it up with the FBI. Take it up with the Uniform Crime Report because you're wrong. I don't know what to tell you.
And I can actually show
you. can sit there and say you're a mathematician and you're a math major. And actually, I don't think that's right because I can't figure this.
Let me show you my citations after you're done with this.
Sure.
And I'll show you why you're right. Well, I'm right and you're wrong.
Sure. Actually. Okay. And this is fine. Like I've seen people do this before where they do mental gymnastics to try to add numbers or do things in a certain way. Bill, actually, I accounted for this and I did this. Dude, the numbers don't lie. Like, it's very simple. Homicide, manslaughter, like, it's just like robbery, all violent crimes. What's up, man?
Welcome to California, Myron.
What's up?
Welcome. I know that it's been rough. What is your stand on 50-50?
When it comes to relationships?
Yes.
Stupid. Now should be done.
Right.
Don't agree with it.
I would say for the young men here, I would highly recommend it to read the 2 copies of Why Women Deserve Less.
And Brett, do me a favor. Pull up the tweet, by the way, that I made on all the black crime statistics. It's on my page on X for me, please. Sorry.
I actually have the copies here.
Of what?
Why Women Deserve Less.
Okay, awesome. Yes. Both. Yes.
Remember,
Why Women Deserve Less, book 1. Why Women Deserve even less, book 2.
It has helped me a lot with a relationship in many years. It's really important to understand women.
Okay, yeah, he's moving off of the topic of race at this point. But yeah, there's something to be said about the propensity for violent crime of different races and things like that. And Sean was right earlier when he was talking about how black on black crime is much higher, white on white crime is much higher, Mexican on Mexican crime is much higher. All of those things are true and factual. But the issue is when you're talking about other races against each other, it is disproportionately blacks that are causing problems for other races and compared to the reverse in terms of murder and violent crime, generally speaking. Let's see what the next one is. Oh, okay. Now, so we've got some stuff from the other side of the house where there is people that are black that are looking at this Karmelo Anthony situation and how, if you are still supporting him, what the deal is on this case. Let's move on.
Stop being an idiot and stop embarrassing those of us who look like you with your foolishness. I'm talking to those of you out there who are taking part in this new trend where you run up on a random white person that you see and you accuse them of being one of the jurors on the Karmelo Anthony trial, and you take out your anger and aggression on them. I know why you're doing this. I'm not stupid. We all know that there is a template now. You've seen this for the past probably, 10 years now, where if your skin color looks a certain way, guess what? You basically can get away with just about anything you want with no consequences. Or if someone actually retaliates against you for acting a fool, then you're the first one who's going to be entitled to some sort of GoFundMe payout or the George Floyd.
Oh man, GoFundMe has been crazy on this. So they went ahead and raised like $500,000 before the trial and after the trial. And they basically blew the money on a new house and all this other stuff. And they claimed that they couldn't afford an attorney, which was the issue at hand earlier in the trial. Pretty wild stuff. Let's continue. This guy is cooking.
Treatment or so on and so forth, right? Let me tell you, that game is played out. No one is going to tolerate that behavior anymore. I'm surprised they tolerated it this long to begin with. But the fact of the matter is, there's far too many people out there who are engaging in this behavior thinking there will be no consequences. And they're unintentionally embarrassing the entire collective whole of their race as a result. They're not going to get the treatment they think they're going to get. They're actually going to get something far worse, and they're actually creating a deeper racial divide because they cannot simply act like normal human beings. I'm sick and tired of it. I'm sick of being lumped in with them, and I'm sick of people dragging down the collective whole with their foolishness. So don't be an idiot. Don't put yourself in a situation where you could become the next George Floyd or Karmelo Anthony, because you're not going to get the hero's welcome or the hero's reception you think you're going to get.
Man, this guy is cooking. All right, who is this guy? Yes, he's getting a follow. I already follow this guy. Yeah, this guy is great. I'm a big fan. Yes. Like, hey, look, if you want respect in our society, act in a respectable manner. If you want people to care about your opinions on things, care about the opinions of others. If you want people to interact with you on a reasonable and rational basis, afford that to your fellow man. The issue at hand here is people are expecting handouts without contributing. So there are certain groups that are a net contributor to society, and there are other groups that are net takers from society. If you're on the net contributor side, generally speaking, you're going to be a law-abiding citizen. You're going to be doing certain things that help to propel the society forward. Absolutely the case. This is interesting. Okay, so I had a talk with somebody earlier today about this very topic. There is a different justice system in a lot of ways, and I think it isn't on lines that a lot of people want to talk about. And I think that there is, generally speaking, a difference in terms of your wealth and your status more than anything else. I think it has to do with socioeconomic condition more than it has to do with race, because you're going to go ahead and see incidence rates of criminality and things like that far lower the higher income you have. You're going to see similar trends as in between the races who is more likely to commit various kinds of crimes. You're going to see that similarity stay in the statistics, but the prevalence of criminality in high income areas is far lower than in low income areas. Very different situation. Also, I think that the kinds of crimes that are prosecuted are very different between if you're rich and poor. I talked to a good friend of mine about this, how in a lot of ways, when you have enough status and enough money, certain things just never get enforced on you to the same extent as they do to other people. Like a speeding ticket doesn't mean as much when you're a multimillionaire. You could just be like, the act of getting pulled over and the time that you're losing on going through and talking to the cop is more of a punishment. That process itself is more of a punishment than the fine or whatever for the speeding ticket itself. Whereas that's in terms of regulatory law. And then you've got things like the moral law, where it doesn't matter how much money you have, the circumstances of the case can go ahead and really mess you up depending on where you're at. and you are more subject to the moral law depending on where you're at, relative to how you are subject to regulatory law. So like speeding tickets and things of that nature. Let's go ahead and see what this gentleman has to say. This guy apparently is a pastor, and he's facing backlash for claiming America should get rid of all black politicians, and he pleads with that they need fathers instead. So this is going to be an interesting perspective. I think that this is something that is not well shared throughout society, but we'll see what he has and give him a fair shake at it. Let's raise the volume.
The other thing that needs to happen, you need to get rid of every black politician. I don't care who it is, Hakeem Jeffries, Jasmine Crockett, or whoever the hell Crockett. You can get rid of every. We don't need no black politician. What we need are black fathers.
All right, so this could be a both and thing. I think that fathers, generally speaking, are better equipped to teach children how to be lawful, good, law-abiding citizens than mothers, generally speaking. And so when the fathers are being kicked out of homes, that serves as a big problem for society. So I think he's cooking there a bit. I don't know about the political representation piece, but let's see what he has to say.
We get that father in that home. We don't need no nigger sitting in no political office licking a white man's ass. What we need is a father in that home. We need we get fathers back in their home, first of all, and they need to be men of God.
Well, there you go. That's important. We need to go ahead and have people enforcing law and order within one's home. That makes sense.
Men of the prophecy, men of the word. We don't need no politician. We can run the world. Strength of the fathers, the mothers, raising children the right way. And the other thing we got to do, we got rid of all black preachers. Yes, that's gonna be difficult. And I prayed about that because I don't want to get in trouble with the Lord, because I was saying, I would like to see some black preachers come walk beside me and say, okay, all right. Black men ain't gonna come near me. Are you serious? They still black. And so I was saying, I was gonna actually, possibly I was not going to come down on the black preacher and say we got to get rid of all of them as well. But that would have been a lie. And I would have been phony. So we got to get rid of all black politicians, all black preachers. We will rise. Trust me.
Oh my gosh. This is interesting. So I think that he's got an unorthodox opinion on this. And I think that I can see why he's getting some backlash on this, because there's something to be said about the positive benefits of having fathers in the household. But when you go ahead and talk about losing your representation in terms of political office and things of that nature, there's second and third order effects to that I think that he's not really thinking through. Same thing with black preachers. Like, hey, look, if we're preaching the word of God, this is really important for us to understand that it takes all kinds to relate to the flock in a reasonable way. If you're a man of God, then you should be able to talk to your children about the word. You should be able to raise good sons and daughters. These are things that should be a thing that is happening in the household. But talking about, kicking out all black preachers, I don't know about all that, but this guy is willing to say some stuff. All right. What do we got next? We've got another person talking about fatigue. Let's continue.
Yesterday, I posted a video about the Karmelo Anthony verdict, and within 24 hours, I've been called every name in the book. My comments and my inbox are full. I hate my own race. I wish I was white. I'm a traitor. I hate my own people. None of that really surprises me anymore. But I want to ask you something. If someone you love is struggling, are you really showing that you care by letting them outsource the blame, play victim, and refuse to change? Or do you show them real love by telling them the truth?
Yeah, she's already cooking right here. It's like, do you want to lie to people or do you tell them the truth? That's important. I think we need more of that in our society, generally speaking.
Life is not fair, and personal responsibility is the only way forward. I have felt called for a while now to speak directly to Black people in America because I believe in our potential, and that potential only unlocks when we get honest about where we are failing. And a lot of us are fatigued. A lot of people are fatigued. Burning down our own neighborhoods when we don't get the verdict we want, fatigued. Turning criminals into celebrities and calling it solidarity, fatigued. Calling every Black person who disagrees a sellout or a traitor, fatigued.
Oh yeah, that happens all the time. That is like the amount of vitriol that is spewed at like Black conservatives is crazy. Just because they leave the Democrat plantation and all of a sudden they're called a sellout, they're called Uncle Tom, they're called all kinds of just disgusting things because they don't see things the same way.
About Black lives while ignoring the zip codes where Black lives are ended by other Black people every single day.
Yeah, we brought this up earlier that like there's a lot of crime that goes on where it's Black on Black crime, and a lot of it's happening in the inner cities right now. Baltimore, Chicago, places like that.
Fatigued. Mobbing a grieving family outside a courthouse, fatigued. Chanting, "We're glad Austin's dead" on camera with no shame, fatigued. A city council candidate calling for a murdered teenager to be dug up and stabbed again, fatigued.
Whoa. A city council, like somebody who's running for city council went ahead and did that? That's crazy. I cannot imagine that would be a good thing. Maybe they've got a Black constituency and they're trying to play to that audience, but man, that is insane. That would not fly where I'm from or where I'm at right now.
And then the comments roll to my page telling me that I'm the problem. This is not hate. This is not self-loathing. This is what love actually looks like.
Yeah, like holding people responsible and holding people accountable to objective standards and things of that nature, where we want to have a set of rules that apply evenly across the board, regardless of what your age, regardless of your creed, your gender, your race, things of that nature, I think is just really important to have so that we can build a society that works well for everybody.
The truth. Love refuses to let people it cares about stay comfortable in something that is killing them. My call to Black America is simple. Get out of your own way. The facts are out there. They are researchable. They are verifiable. And they show that we have enormous room to grow and heal and thrive without waiting on external forces to give us permission or to blame. We are sitting here waiting on a handout, a program, a huge shift in our favor when everything we need starts with looking within. That is what I was pointing at with Karmelo Anthony, a kid with every reason to succeed who still got swallowed by a mentality we refuse to honestly examine. I know I will not reach everyone, but if one person watching this snaps out of it the way that I did, that is enough. So when you
Yeah, she's cooking on this one. Absolutely. Because this is one of the things that we need to do in our society and realize that as long as we're taking accountability for our own actions, our own circumstances, and being willing to play the game with the hand that we're dealt and look to find other people to band together with and to live life together, I think that we end up with much better outcomes as a result of that.
Comments with the names and the accusations, ask yourself honestly, what exactly are you defending? Because from where I'm sitting, it looks a lot less like Black pride and a whole lot like protecting a narrative that is not serving us.
Yeah, she's cooking. She is cooking on that. Let's see. And then here's another Black conservative talking about what he thinks about this. Let's adjust volume settings and then we'll let it go.
Good morning, everyone. Sunday morning Tat Talk with Jamal. And let me start this off. Just because I am a Black man and a defendant in a crime is Black, it is not my responsibility to defend him simply because he's Black.
Mm-hmm.
For the past few days, some of you have been writing, how can you turn on another fellow Black man?
Yeah, as if the merits of the case don't matter. Right? Like, I don't care what the color of your skin is, but if you're a murderer, you're a murderer, right? Black, white, blue, brown, red, all of that stuff. Yeah, it doesn't matter. Let's actually look at the content of one's character and actually look at your actions and provide commensurate consequences in association with those actions.
That mentality is why the Black community is in shambles like it is.
Right?
You believe because the defendant is Black Black folk responsibility is to defend the criminal.
Yep, that's the problem.
My job as a black man is to make sure if the criminal black, white, Latino, Asian, his whatever, tell the truth. And if he's wrong, he's wrong.
Bam. Just said the same thing. I don't care if you're black, white, blue, yellow, red. I don't care. If you did the crime, you should probably do the time. And we should go ahead and look at the facts and circumstances of the case, not the color of the person's skin. Let's continue.
And I will not be pushing false narratives and lies to justify because we black. Karmelo Anthony, his so-called friend, who he was there under the tent to see, said, we won't cool like that, black people. If you are out here defending Karmelo Anthony and saying what he did was self-defense, then people are going to look at us and going to say we're lying. And the next time a young black man is faced with something like this, and he really was being harassed and someone really attacked him, and he may not have a knife, he may just pick up a weapon, whatever's close to him, to defend himself. You know what they're going to say? Oh, this is just another Karmelo Anthony. And that young black man will be locked up or worse.
Yeah, that's the problem with the boy who cried wolf, is when you go ahead and see this so much as a pervasive part of your society, it becomes a part of the standing narrative. And that's why I think that this kind of thing really needs to be fought against in so many ways, and why it's worthwhile to push for law and order and to make sure that people have a fair shake of things in their day at court, because we don't want this to be a situation of the boy who cried wolf and then people not get due process and things like that, where it's really important that we have those rights so that in the event of a tyrannical government and things like that, that we have more defenses against these kinds of things. Let's continue.
He's going to be picking up his book bag to leave the situation. Somebody's going to say, oh, he's reaching for a weapon. And black folk, you got to think. This crap we teaching our children is not productive. It's not good. We're teaching our children to be victims or inmates.
Yeah, so it's really interesting. So he mentioned, like, if you're trying to rush to pull something out of your bag, that you're going to end up getting shot. There's something to be said about that. Like, anytime you have a situation with law enforcement, it is to your benefit to, one, declare your actions clearly, two, to go ahead and make slow, gradual movements so that they don't claim that you are making a jerking action to try to get something over on them, because they are trained to look at threats and escalate violence if necessary. So if you're just like, hey, you're in custody, put your hands up and be like, hey, I'm reaching for my wallet, and just very slowly go reach for your wallet, pull the wallet out and show it to them. Be like, I am reaching for my ID. Open it up slowly, take it out, close up the wallet. I'm putting the wallet back. Here is my ID. You know, really slow and deliberate movement. That way people to go ahead and mischaracterize what you're doing. And that would solve so many issues, especially now that everybody has body cams for the most part. Big game changer in a lot of things. So this was really good commentary by Rob. Let's see the comments on this one. I'm going to go ahead and change the perspective on camera. Here we go. Hey, there we go. No, your mentality is why the black community is like it is. We can't just trust none of you ninjas. It's just that want to be white or take another race side against your own race, but y'all know black, LOL, scared of then y'all want, what? Okay, he's getting ratioed. Let's see what else we got here. It's true, though. It doesn't matter what color you are. If you push a lie to defend someone clearly in the wrong, next time something this happens is actually true, no one will believe them. Yeah, I'll give them a like on that one. 100%. Are those Ray-Ban Clubmaster glasses? Yeah. Okay, cool. So generally positive outlook for this guy.
Good morning, everyone.
Good. Hey. All right. Moving on to the next one. All right. So this is kind of a place that I want to go ahead and end up on, is that we see a lot of issues with people trying to talk about race in the church. And a lot of people are concerned about things like Christian nationalism and things like kinism, where a lot of people are like, oh, well, we don't want to have white racism. And other people are like, but we're perfectly happy with black segregation. And then when people say they want white segregation, they give them problems with it. Here's something that was brought up to the Presbyterians. PCUSA are having apparently in Twin Falls, Idaho this week, there was a synod to adopt a statement because of something that was going on. A synod is a group of people in the Presbyterian Church that decide on policy. So let's go ahead and take a look at this video, and we'll see what this person has to say on the matter.
Introduce yourself, tell us for or against.
Yeah, Christopher Folkerts from Twin Falls, Idaho. Maybe a quick question, just in view of the previous comment. Do we need to wait for an overture to create a study committee?
We're just talking about that.
Okay. Well, while you're thinking about that, I don't want to repeat things that have already been said. I do echo what Brother Bilesma said, that this is before the body, and we have to have some positive response to what we're facing at a federation of churches. And I appreciate the work that the study committee, the advisory committee has put before us and how you've wrestled with this. And I understand that you're not saying that this isn't in our churches. And all I have is an anecdote, but we have a church of about 20 families. And tomorrow, 3 of our families are going to a conference in Salt Lake City where Stephen Wolfe will be speaking. They are drinking this stuff like.
So apparently Stephen Wolfe is somebody who's a Christian nationalist. So they're concerned about this.
A nursing baby from its mother's breast. There are CREC churches popping up across our country like wildfire. We have an opportunity to stand with our NAPARC churches. If I can go home and say to these 3 families that NAPARC churches are adamantly opposed to this, that will carry a lot of weight.
So what he's trying to do is get this group of people to agree on something so that he could take that agreement and take it back to his congregation and say, hey, look, you 3 families that disagree with me, because all these other people agree with me, you should agree with me now. Not going to stand on the merits of what actually is the case, but he's going to say, because we agree, you should go ahead and obey, not based on what actually is the case. Let's continue.
So if it's not this, it needs to be something. And if we have to kick this down the road, 4 years is too long to wait. I mean, we're going to fight this battle regardless. But I would love our brothers to be able to say, we're standing with NAPARC, and there is no moral superiority of any race over another race. That needs to be underscored.
Yeah, that's pretty easy. It's easy to go ahead and make the argument that there should be no argument for superiority or inferiority about anybody in the church. Very clearly laid out in Galatians 3, where there is neither Gentile nor Jew, neither slave nor master, nor male nor woman, in terms of their eligibility for heirship and sonship in Christ. Nothing against their moral value and worth. That's one thing. But if we go ahead and take a look at this and we divide it from the context of that passage, people also get confused, and that's why they bring up things like women pastors and things of that nature. And that's also an abomination because they're taking that out of its natural context to try to get it to say something that it doesn't say. So let's go ahead and close out on this. And we're going to go ahead and look at what they're trying to go ahead and pass. Look at the text and all of that. All right. So here we go. It says, expressing agreement with other NAPARC members, that's a specific part of the Presbyterian Church. A clear statement was adopted condemning any form of teaching or support which posits a superiority of one ethnic identity. Totally agree. That's a good idea. This statement intends to publicly address concerns in all culture regarding growing expressions of anti-Semitism and ethnic hostility. All right, now this is where it goes off the rails, because now we're just talking about, we want to protect against anti-Semitism is really the big thing that they're trying to protect against here. And there's a lot of issue with dispensationalists and things of that nature where they have this overt belief that because of things in the Bible that, we have to support the Jews regardless of what they do. I think that is is a questionable reading of scripture, but I'm not going to go ahead and express agreement or disagreement on either side of that aisle, but I just know that that is a deeply held core conviction for a lot of people. Right now, I haven't done enough research into it to know one side of the other where I stand on it. But I do know that there's an awful lot of support and detraction on both sides of that, and it's just not been a high priority for me to look into. All right. The following statement was officially adopted by the Synod in 2026, that in solidarity with other faithful Reformed federations, Synod condemns without distinction any theological or political teaching which posits a God-ordained superiority of one ethnicity over another in the church or in civil society, in which claims divine warrant for a higher worth, dignity, or rightful dominion for any ethnicity over another. Makes sense. So if we look at a proper reading of Galatians 3, that first part makes a lot of sense. We don't want there to be any distinctions in terms of how the law is applied. We don't want any distinctions in how we determine who is eligible for salvation, any of those things. All of that is right on board so far. Here's where things go kind of sideways, though. This includes, but is not limited to, kinism, race realism, and anti-Semitism. Okay, so kinism apparently is exclusively whites trying to be in white churches with other white people is when that's a problem. We're going to go ahead and show how if that is the reverse, there's no problems according to these people. Race realism and then anti-Semitism. Okay, therefore, Synod calls to repentance any who promote such teaching or knowingly and persistently support those who promote it. Okay, makes a lot of sense. If we go ahead and look at just, hey, race and ethnicity, generally speaking, it all makes sense in terms of scripture. But when we go ahead and start focusing down on very specific things while disregarding other things that would also be caught in this same umbrella, that's where we see the teeth of this kind of thing is not evenly met and where I have a problem with it. All right. Scripture teaches that all people share equally in the image of God. Yes. Are equally fallen in Adam. Yes. And are being gathered through the gospel by Christ into one body from every tribe. Yes. Language. Yes. People. Yes. And nation. Yes. Agree with all that. The church should aspire to reflect this locally. Sure. I mean, to the extent reasonable that's voluntarily associated. Synod does not deny diversity of gifts and histories which God has bestowed on the nations. Yeah. So that's what they did. Now, here's where the problem lies. They are very happy to go ahead and talk about kinism and all that and how that's a problem. But then they've got openly kinist church plants of other races that they have done in the past. So this is evangelical dark web. They have a presence on Twitter and they have a presence on YouTube. I'll go ahead and show them off here shortly. But this is a written article and says PCA co-sponsors openly kinist church plant. The PCUSA has long been considered a doctrinally conservative and confessionally reformed denomination, but in recent years has found itself on the wrong side of woke wars too. To briefly review, just like Woke Wars 1 was about going woke for blacks, Woke Wars 2 is about going woke for Jews. In both cases, these skirmishes are a part of an anti-white movement. Yeah, that's the issue, is that it's exclusively anti-white in its nature. That's the problem. If we could go ahead and just treat everybody equally and have everybody on the same sheet of music, on the same rules, that would be fine. But no, they actively resist that. Currently in the PCA, there are 2 teaching elders under investigation for promoting some form of quote unquote racism, kinism, or Spanglerism, adherence to the teachings of divested OPC minister Michael Spangler. He recently opened up his own denomination. These are Reverend Zach Garris and Rev Rick Appleton. Additionally, the PCA formed a committee in 2025 to study Christian nationalism and ethno-nationalism more broadly, which may result in more disciplinary actions against ruling and teaching elders. While nothing has been published by the committee, there's a social media war being conducted against these men and others by Eli McGowan, who coincidentally attends the same church as one of the committee members. So Eli McGowan is some guy that researches kinism and anything that anywhere sounds like white racism towards anything else. He blows whistles on people. Sometimes he's in the right. Sometimes he's just really sensitive to things. That's the problem that I have with it. However, Kindred Hope church plant. So in the midst of all this tension of white pastors being under attack, It's very curious that a church plant is underway in South Fulton, Georgia, called Kindred Hope Church. The city itself is 90% Black and known as a Black Mecca of Atlanta. In order to appeal to this majority, the church explicitly claims to value Black American excellence, progress, success, culture, and its culture's global influence. So you see that they're overly focused on the Black side of things. The planting pastor and his wife are Howard and Kelly Brown. Kindred Church was launched in 2023 in partnership with Perimeter Church and Mission to North America's African American Ministries. It is very central to this story and will come up later in the article. Perimeter Church was interviewed the Brown couple at the time, and they did not hide their motives with respect to planting a hyper-racialized church. Quite frankly, you need not look any further than the kindred being part of its name. All this stands in stark contrast to the current witch hunt for white PCA elders promoting racist and kinist viewpoints. That's basically what we were just listening about and reading about during the current synod that's going on in the PCA. Who is Howard Brown? Let's read about who he is. The founder of Kindred Hope has been pushing CRT in the denomination, says critical race theory in the denomination for many years. Howard Brown was previously an associate coordinator of that organization. He was heavily involved in its annual leadership development resource, which he promoted in 2020 as a place for the Black minority to be the majority. He's literally wearing a t-shirt with a Wu-Tang Clan bird logo with Wakanda superimposed. Then in 2022, Brown was featured by Woke Preacher Clips for a radicalized reinterpretation for a racialized interpretation of David and Goliath. Briefly, he describes David as the racial justice movement, and it just gets worse from there. This guy is every stereotype of a race-obsessed pastor that you can imagine wrapped up into one. Obviously, there's a point of view that these guys over at Evangelical Dark Web are pushing, but the source material, he wouldn't have reason to say these things if it wasn't in the source material. There's a potential conflict of interest regarding the funding of the Kindred Hope plant. As stated earlier, Howard Brown previously worked for AAMPCA, and his wife Kelly still does as the operations director. It seems rather suspicious to us that the couple is employed by the same organization that is sponsoring their church planting work, who is actually signing off on this funding decision. Furthermore, there seems to be an effort to bury the funding apparatus. It's not the PCA sponsoring the plant, because they're openly saying that they're against race-based things right now. So, of course, they can't be directly involved. It's not the MNA sponsoring the plant. It's the AAM of the MNA of the PCA sponsoring the plant. So it's merely our opinion in evaluating how this endeavor is being sneakily funded, at least from a cursory view of the situation. In conclusion, it is 100% clear that the PCA doesn't think that kinism is a sin in general, but only when white people do it. Nevertheless, the denomination, moderated by managerial liberal Kevin DeYoung, will continue its attacks on white elders unabated. We hope that the obvious double standard demonstrated by Kindred Hope will wake up its members and pastors to seek alternative fellowships. Remaining in the denomination seems dangerous at this point for anyone with views 1 inch to the right of a typical boomer con. All right, so that kind of wraps up what I had prepared today for the topic of what was going on with Karmelo Anthony, what's going on in terms of race relations in the United States, and things of that nature. There was a question that was brought up earlier in the stream by Average Joe. All right, so he's not from the U.S. Could he give a short wrap up of how bad the racial problem is? Well, it depends on how you define the racial problem and how you define racism as a whole. Now, in the United States, we more or less have a left and right boundary. There's people on the left that are more liberal, people on the right that are more conservative, and they will define racism, and they will set a different box on this whole thing that makes it difficult to have conversation about this in an honest way. If you're more on the left, your definition of racism only includes people that have privilege and some form of institutional power. In order for you to be a racist, you need to be of a privileged group, and your privileged group has to have some kind of institutional power, is the way that the left sees it, because they see pretty much everything in a Marxian or a Marxist way, where everything is about power and it's about power struggles and things of that nature. If you're on the right, you go ahead and tend to look at racism as a matter of the superiority or inferiority of one race, ethnicity, class over another. And because you have very different definitions of what racism actually is, that's where you end up with different views on how race relations are going on in the United States right now. And we can see, based on what's happening with the Karmelo Anthony verdict, what happened with the case, and different way people are reacting to this, that there is a lot of dissent, especially when it comes from like white leftist liberals and how they put so much additional burden on other people compared to how they put handouts into the hands of people that are Black, generally speaking. So very interesting stuff going on. I've got the Forge Fellowship tomorrow. We're going to be going through the last bits of Mark. We're starting in chapter 13, and we'll finish up the book in chapter 16. From there, we'll move on to the book of Acts and go through there. That's our Sunday fellowship here on the channel. On Tuesday, I've got a huge video about feminism in the church. There's a lot to go through. It's about 30 minutes. It's going to be worth the watch. I go through a lot of the mechanisms of how feminism has taken root in the church and what is going on, so that hopefully we can identify that which is going on so that we can actively work against it. Thank you so much for taking the time and viewership. I really appreciate you. I hope you all have a fantastic rest of your weekend. The Forge is ready. It's time to get to work, gentlemen.